It's the beginning of a new year, so we're halfway through the symphony season.
Yep. Actually, it's kind of funny because it's not really the halfway point, even though it feels it.
Feels like it.
I mean, before the holidays, we had actually done, our opening concert and then Holiday Pops. That's just 2 concerts. We've got a whole lot more. It's almost like we're a third of the way through the symphony season, and there's more on this end than there was on that end. But yeah, it's a halfway point.
But it's like 3 or 4 months and we're done.
Yeah.
Let's start with an introduction.
Al Correa. There's a joke, but I won't tell you on air, about the guy who gets stopped by the police officer and says, "Don't you know who I am?" So at any rate. But Paul Surapine, founding executive artistic director of Claflin Hill Symphony, nice to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And Claflin Hill has not only survived another year, but is thriving.
Yeah, well, let's not get carried away. I mean, it's surviving. We're going along. We're in the black. We're paying our bills.
So compared to most, that's thriving.
Well, I don't know. Things are improving, I think, out there. So, we're kind of riding that little tiny wave of whatever, people feeling a little more confident about the economy. So you see things happening. But and then on the other hand, I mean, even during the recession, we were actually growing the symphony as an organization. In the midst of struggling to pay bills, we were actually increasing programming every year, even through the recession. So,
but I don't hear we're 25 grand in the hole, or I wish I could pay the musicians for this concert.
Yeah.
Last concert before they played this one.
Well, yeah, okay, so the water level used to be up around over my head, and I used to sort of like snorkel with a straw to breathe. Now the water levels come down below my chin.
I was going to say.
The musicians are getting paid on time. We finished the last 3 fiscal years in a row in the black, which is a good thing, so our accounting firm could finally stop putting that
ongoing
disclaimer
concern.
Going concern clause at the end of the report.
This is not an ongoing concern in our...
I mean, I used to kind of laugh. It's almost like a dare, You can't do that. Oh, really? Well, watch me.
Not dead yet.
Yeah, so... and we even kind of gave the musicians a little bump in their compensation over the last season or so, kind of spread it out over 2 years. And I mean, and I'm not talking about a lot of money.
Well, it's also when you say... I'm joking saying you're thriving. You say you made it in the black. This is not massive amounts of money left over at the end of the year either.
No. I mean, if we're a couple thousand above, well, that's a good thing,
And to me, when I remember 25 grand in the hole,
well, yeah,
2 grand above sounds like wonderful.
Yeah, I guess that's okay.
To the musicians who had to, Paul, do you think I can get paid from 3 months ago?
Yeah,
getting paid on time is going to be kind of nice.
And they noticed that. One of them even, sent me a nice email about the little increase, which, over the course of 2 years represents an almost 10% increase in what they make on a concert week. And it had been 10 years since they'd had any kind of
raise.
Any raise. And I mean, when we started out, we were, competitive, if not even a little above the compensation for other similar regional orchestras, because I didn't want anybody to ever start playing with Claflin Hill thinking this was kind of like a favor they were doing, or it was kind of a bummer of a gig. I wanted them to be challenged by the music and the level that we perform at, but also feel like they were getting, respected by the way they were compensated. And then when they got a little bump this year, that was noticed, and that just makes the appreciation they feel even more so, on the part of what they feel coming from the board of directors. I mean, after all, they are the product. Without them, you have nothing to be a board of director about anything. But between that and also just the ongoing I don't know what you want to call it, love affair between the orchestra musicians and their audience, you know, is a continuous thing. I mean, and the orchestra truly responds to that. I mean, they feel the way the audience feels about them, and they
Sure.
feel that way right back. So, you know,
Well,
it's
it's
a
the
great
same
thing.
faces, looking the angles. I mean, you look out there and it's the same faces.
Yeah,
more or
I
less.
mean, we have more than I'd say 65, 70% retention. There's still a huge amount of musicians sitting in that orchestra that remember the first days. I mean, as a matter of fact, just the other day, we were playing at the Stadium Theater in Woonsocket, being the backup orchestra for the Irish tenor, world-renowned Ronan Tynan, and we had a rehearsal with him on Saturday afternoon at 3:30. That's the first time we got together with him. He came in from a concert engagement the night before in Florida, flew up, met us at 3:30. We rehearsed for 2 hours, ran through the whole program he was going to sing, and then the stadium gives us a buffet dinner in between, which was very nice of them. And we ended up, you know, Ronan Tynan and his pianist, who he brings with him on all his performances, ate dinner with us, which I thought was nice. You know, actually had thought probably he would have had a different personal arrangement for dinner, but he sat with the orchestra, had dinner, and when I finally got to sit down and have a bite to eat with him, it was apparent he'd already been quizzing the orchestra members about the whole background of Claflin Hill Symphony. You know, what is this and who are they? And
Oh, wow.
so when I sat down, I mean, he said, congratulations. And I said, oh, thanks, you know, for what? He said, for this orchestra, because, you know, he had been sitting with some of the musicians who had been telling them all about the orchestra, what we do, when it started. And as a matter of fact, I was sitting across from Nan Foley, our principal horn player, who had been telling him, and she was there on the first ever performance back 17 years ago. So, you know, it's an ongoing thing.
Is it normal to have that kind of retention?
Well, I mean, I think it's normal in major city orchestras
if I'm on the
when they're
BSO
getting paid
getting paid 100 plus,
$150,000. You know, you're not.
I'm not
leaving.
giving it up.
You don't leave till you die. And they
No,
carry
that
out.
I understood.
Yeah.
But regional, I guess,
Regional symphonies. I don't know. I mean, by and large, some of it, you know, some of them. There's two different ways musicians approach this kind of orchestra. Either they just view it as a stepping stone as they're trying to climb somewhere else, or else, like our concertmaster, Ongo, who could play violin anywhere in the world, you know, kind of looks at what we're doing and then decides, this is a good place to set down roots and make a home and make my career here, which is kind of how I viewed it. There's a number of other musicians that kind of came to that same realization. Our principal violist, Dmitry Petkov. You know, I was having a talk with him one time. Our previous concertmaster, who was terrific, his name was Nikola Takov. He was from Bulgaria, a boyhood friend of Dimitr's.
I was going to say, is this a Bulgarian connection all the way
Well,
through?
there is a lot of Bulgarians in the orchestra. It's kind of funny because they bring each other with them, you know. But Nikola got a chance to go play in a major orchestra in Spain about, you know, almost 10 years ago. So he kind of left Claflin Hill and all the other gigs he had here, you know, packed up, went to Spain. I mean, it was a major gig. I mean, you know, it was like every week, full year orchestra job, you know. I mean, 50 weeks a year with vacation and playing all the time. I mean, he got there and I think he wasn't quite as happy. And I remember Dmitry saying he had been talking to Nikola and said, you know, I think what Paul is doing is perhaps, you know, a good thing to consider, you know, that maybe you can make great music in a place that you didn't think was going to be your
Now,
home.
how do they make great music and eat?
By playing as many different orchestra jobs as they can do. They teach. I mean,
I was
Dimitr's a
thinking,
good,
I mean, realistically, there's the BSO.
yeah,
And what kind of turnover do they have? Probably
not a whole lot.
not a lot.
Right.
How many other full-time gigs are available in this
Well,
area?
in New England, really, there's no other orchestra in New England outside of the Boston Symphony that could be considered a full-time orchestra job. I mean, they're all part-time jobs, you know.
So
a week here,
Hartford,
a week
Providence, Springfield.
there. Providence and Hartford and Portland are kind of on the same level. They run about a $5 million budget a year.
Oh, wow.
They have 8 or 9 symphony concerts in their season, plus a lot of other performance things. You know, Hartford also has, maybe if the ballet is running, then they become the ballet orchestra. They have some pops concerts. They have educational concerts. I mean, they put together probably what we would call, you know, in terms of playing a rehearsal or a concert, that's a service. So some of those orchestras have maybe, say, 120 services in the season. And so maybe they're making
That's every
30,000.
How much?
30,000 for the year, which means they also have to have
So they're
some other
playing
income.
every 3 days,
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
and they're bringing in $30-some thousand.
Yeah. Hartford actually almost lost their symphony back 2 years ago. I mean, they went on strike because their board of directors decided they wanted to institute a huge cutback, like 33% drop in
So you're
pay.
going to pay him 20 grand a year?
Something like that. I mean, it was pretty messy.
I mean, seriously, you've got somebody, an uncle, who has dedicated his life to mastering his skill. And you say, I'm going to pay you less than I pay the person who probably took a little less time to learn to say, do you want fries with that order?
I guess it's kind of funny when you think about it. Not
What?
funny, but
No,
sad.
it's sad because, wow, you know, and there's only 6 in New England, 6 symphonies that you could make that kind of money at.
Yeah. Springfield, well, Springfield's probably a little smaller than Hartford, but I mean, people have to scurry around. They have to try and fit into their schedule, like a lot of our musicians. I'll give you an example of other orchestras of a similar size to Claflin Hill. There's the Orchestra of Indian Hill, which is up in Littleton, Mass. Okay, they have almost kind of an identical size season. Plymouth Philharmonic, they've been in business almost 110 years, I think, but they're basically about the same size season as Claflin Hill. There's the Cape Symphony, and Lexington has a symphony, you know, and so everybody's trying to fit a schedule together, you know, as a musician where, you know, if they're a member of Claflin Hill and they also play with Lexington and they play Plymouth, you know, they got to try and juggle as many of those concerts each symphony is doing so that they hopefully can be working almost every week or every other week through the symphony season, you know?
But it still seems like a stretch because if I juggle, I mean, Claflin Hill is what, 5-6 weeks a year? for
Yeah, I mean, we
musicians?
have 6 weeks of major symphony concerts. Then we have some chamber concerts, which not all of them participate in. Yeah.
But, you know, you'd have to stitch almost 10 Claflin Hills together to have...
Well, they also teach, though, too. Some of them have public school music teaching jobs, so that they can work that, and which is another aspect. See, you know, as orchestras, all those that I just mentioned, we're all like nighttime orchestras. We rehearse in the evenings. So somebody could have
A day
job teaching, you know, like we have a number of our musicians that teach music over at the Franklin Public School System or school systems throughout the area. And they're able to maintain that job, or some of us just do private teaching at various community music schools like I do and Demeter does and a number
That's got to
of
be
them.
tougher because of insurance.
Yeah, well, hopefully you have a spouse like I do who's got a...
I'm going to say, Susan, don't lose your
Yeah,
day
I know,
job.
right, you know. Yeah, there's those considerations too, because none of us as an organization or a company, Claflin Hill or Indian Hill, can afford to provide the musicians with health care
With
plans.
$18,000 worth of health insurance for the family?
Yeah. I mean, we'd go out of business if we were required to do that. So, yeah, I mean, but that's the life we chose.
But now, how do people get known? I mean, you don't have to go out groveling for musicians anymore from Claflin Hill.
Yeah, I pretty much never did have to, but I mean, there's this whole network of,
So I moved to New England. I'm a violinist.
well, you start, maybe you came to the region because you went to you decided to go to graduate school, say at New England Conservatory or BU, and you meet a couple other string players, and a couple of them are going off to do some orchestra gig this week, and they find out about that, and they ask about it, and they ask to have their name passed on, and perhaps if one of our musicians has played with this newcomer on something.
So when you're filling out the orchestra, I'll say, hey, Paul, have you heard so-and-so?
Yeah, basically. I mean, just recently, there's a couple who just came to the region from Mexico. Now, they happen to be the sister and brother-in-law of our principal violist. Demeter Petkov, his sister and her husband were, living and working in Mexico, and they decided to move up here to New England, probably for the weather. And, they're living in Hudson. And when they were about to make the move, Demeter had mentioned to me that they were coming, and if there was some way I could fit them in now and then or throw them some work. And I said, well, I'll see what I can do. I mean, right now we got a pretty full string section, so, and there's a sub list, and he understood. He said, well, anything you do. Well, as it happened, I had another husband-wife violin team in the orchestra who ended up having to pass on our opening season concert back in November, kind of at the last minute. So it was suddenly, bang,
Can you step in?
I emailed Demeter's sister and brother-in-law and said, you have a chance, can you come and play? And they were both available and worked out really nicely. Good players, got along with everybody in the section. They've already done 2 or 3 gigs with us since then.
Do you have to evaluate a new musician before you dare blend them into the orchestra, or are they all kind of within a tolerance band?
I mean,
acceptable?
I could ask them to come play for me. I kind of rarely do that. I usually rely on the judgment of the people who are...
I see. So if Angel says they're at this level,
right,
you don't have to...
Yeah, I'm not going to question them. Or, somebody in one of the wind sections says, they met this horn player, and we took on a new 4th horn player this season. She was kind of a known quantity. I know who she studied with. Her father actually was in the original Milford concert band years ago, and then he kind of retired. Both his kids went into music, and both of them had played with us as like student intern kind of specialties, back when they were in high school. So this particular young lady has gone off to school, graduated. I needed a horn sub for a concert and had gone through a couple of names, and somebody said, well, what about Paige? She really is a heck of a player, and she'd probably be a great fit in the section. And she came in, and after the first concert, I offered her the whole season.
Wow.
And, there's a case where, as a wind player myself, when I'm conducting the orchestra, I can hear the impact she had in that section. So immediately that's apparent. Sometimes when you have like 18 violinists all scrubbing away in the section and there's a new one in there, it's not like I'm going to be able to tell how that one is sounding, but, I'll ask the stand partner or somebody in the section.
But the brass seems to be more able to stand out.
Yeah.
You got 3 or 4.
Well, yeah. All the wind players are singular, nobody is doubling their parts. Everybody's got their own part, and if somebody beefs a note, it's amazing.
Somebody plays the clarinet the wrong way.
Yeah, somebody squeaks.
You especially, if somebody squeaks, you're going to know for sure.
You know where that squeak came from.
Even the rest of us can probably,
yeah,
we wouldn't know where it came from, but That seemed out of place.
Yeah, so, you know, wind players in an orchestra are always a little more exposed, you might say. So we're used to that, you know. The string players play in a large section, so it kind of brings about certain personality traits in each kind of musician,
But how
depending on
hard
what
is
they
it
play.
for somebody to step into a Claflin Hill? You're pulling two new people who've never played with Claflin Hill. Is there a dynamic that they now have to kind of adjust to, or?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, for instance, number one, I mean, almost all of these people, when they come in, say, for the first time, they most likely have played in some good orchestras in their past. They're not like coming to us and have never played in an
They've
orchestra.
not just graduated high school.
Right, and they're not coming from a community orchestra or something, and we're going to give them a try, you know. But, you know, they've played, and they've played the repertoire. So when you tell them we're doing the Sibelius First Symphony next week, it's like, oh yeah, you know, they've played that. So they're starting from a certain point that gives them the ability to step in. And then the next part of it is, you know, kind of the unique personality that Claflin Hill has as an orchestra, which, you know, like the TV station here has been running a number of interviews over the last year or so with a number of our musicians. And, you know, when I see them, you know, they all kind of talk about the same thing, about what it's like to be a member of this orchestra, about the way it feels like a family, the way the audience and the orchestra interact, you know, and you don't get that in a lot of orchestras. Not every orchestra has this kind of close camaraderie within it where everybody really likes each other and gets along with each other, and everybody's kind of cheering with for each other to play. And also that, you know, the way we present concerts is like, you know, I don't know, it's kind of a meld of, you know, great serious music with pop music and explaining to the audience what we're playing. I mean, you know, you've been to our concerts, you know, I turn around and talk, and, you know, that for a musician sometimes can be a little unique when they first come to it.
I was going to say, as a musician, I've got to want to be challenged. You know, when I think of a typical Claflin Hill concert, sometimes you say, well, didn't I just get two concerts in one?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we'll talk about the upcoming. I wouldn't want to be late, because after 5 minutes, I've missed. I mean, the first 4 minutes, you're packing a symphony into 4 minutes here.
Yeah, I mean, the opening piece, the Stravinsky piece called Fireworks.
It is fireworks.
It is fireworks, yeah. And
I mean, God bless you that you can't make it more than 4 or 5 minutes. I think you'd have musicians falling down. But
yeah, I mean, that 4 minutes might be some of the most strenuous minutes in the entire night for the orchestra. So,
But you think about when you did the Planets. Still, I loved it. You know, I mean, so many concerts I look back on seem like, holy moly, it's intermission.
Mm-hmm.
We're only halfway through?
And then we did the Planets.
and then
Yeah.
you know, it's like, we're only halfway through it. We got a whole nother symphony to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were kind of telling Ronan Tynan a little bit about, you know, some of the music that we do and the way that we pack all this music into a concert night. And sometimes musicians will joke if it seems like the program is a little shorter than usual, and they're asking if I'm perhaps going to throw out a major symphony, you know, on the first rehearsal. By the way, we're also doing that, which sometimes has been done, but, you know, I mean, so, you know, all of these musicians that find their way to Claflin Hill end up, after a while, you know, becoming part of the family. I get a lot of nice emails from them, you know, after concerts about the things that we just did together, the feeling that they felt from the audience, the energy, the love, the appreciation, all that sort of thing. It's kind of neat. I mean, you know what? Back, I don't know, a couple months ago, a friend of mine sent me this video clip, and it's about the Patriots, New England Patriots, okay? It's called Do Your Job. Now, probably a lot of people have seen that. It's like a 15-minute little segment. might have been produced for by NFL on one of those, sports talk.
Sure.
And it's centered around the Super Bowl against Seattle, in that, fabled last 2 minutes of the game, when Malcolm Butler intercepted that pass on the 1 yard line, the whole thing, right? Now, I've always kind of admired the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft, for what they have achieved. I mean, in a sense, as a business model, I started kind of trying to emulate, like a sports franchise when we began Claflin Hill. I mean, how do you create an orchestra? Well, you've got a product, but you have to sell it. And what do we have to sell? Well, we have sponsorships to sell. That's what brings the money in, that pays the musicians, that creates the concert events that the community can appreciate, So like when they built Gillette Stadium, they sold the ability to put your corporate logos all over the stadium, right? So that when the TV cameras are panning across on a national broadcast, you see Fidelity or you see Putnam Investments and all those other companies, right? So what do? We sell sponsorships of each concert night. So that was one way that, I kind of looked at what they were doing. The other thing was, I studied for 15 years in New York City with what can be considered the greatest clarinet teacher on earth for the last 100 years. I mean, the students he taught, and it's a very select, small group of people that could actually endure that teaching from that man, played at a level on the clarinet that you rarely see. So my clarinet teacher was, a guy who had a, specific plan all the time for how to become better at the clarinet. And when you look at what Bill Belichick is as a football coach, he's kind of, I used to say, the Calvin Opperman of football. He teaches his team how to play. And in the end, it doesn't matter who's on the team. I mean, people come in, they go out. I mean, God hope that, we don't ever see Tom Brady leave until he's ready to retire.
People like Gronkowski that all of a sudden is gone.
He's gone, and, we love the Gronk.
Yeah.
But we're winning, and other guys are stepping up. Now, so I watched this video, and, and then it was all about the way the team feels about each other, and of course this is set in the moments also right after the Super Bowl victory, and they're hugging and, crying and, I love you, man, and the whole thing, right? Well, I sent that out to the whole symphony at the holiday. I said, it was a great opening of the year so far, great job. And, like for instance, on that opening night in November, I had a different principal flute player, a different principal oboe player, a different principal bassoon player, and 2 new horn players in the orchestra. Not to mention a few new faces sprinkled in the strings. And yet, it was one of our best opening nights ever. And you would never know that any of those people playing those principal roles that I just mentioned weren't the usual principal player. They stepped up, they played great, and everybody in the orchestra was kind of like cheering for them, because they had these big moments where they had to be the principal, and they did it. And, it's the whole do your job.
Well, I got to admit, I was a little worried about Holiday Pops. Susan will hate me, but how many years we're going, and it's always Holly and, the reindeer people, and and you said, well, we're changing this year.
Well, that was last year. I mean, the Greater Milford Community Chorus came.
And all of a sudden, they stepped in, and you sit there and say, wow, it's just as good as it was.
Well, there's another example, too. It's kind of like, it's like being a good manager or a good boss, right? You give people an opportunity, you encourage them, you give them all the tools they are going to need to succeed, and you also kind of show where the expectation is going to be.
You just took half your staff and replaced it all in one fell swoop.
Yeah, but, so 2 years ago, the New World Chorale was suddenly no longer available to us at Holiday Pops. And I was thinking, you know, what can we do? I mean, we could do a Holiday Pops without a chorus. I mean, a lot of orchestras do that. And then, you know, there's the Greater Milford Community Chorus. Now, they've been around a long time. I've been to some of their concerts. I thought, well, they can do Holiday Pops. I mean, they do their own holiday concerts. So, you know, how hard would it be for them to sing with this? I mean, it's going to be a different dynamic for them. So that first year, which was 2015, they came and sang. They did a great job. Nobody really could tell it wasn't the other chorus. No. This year, we did it again, plus we repeated Holiday Pops at the Stadium Theater in Woonsocket. That was the first time ever. I'll tell you, that chorus even jumped a whole different level between last year and this year. And, you know, and then the opportunity to repeat a concert, which is really nice. I wish we could do that all the time because, you know, you do all this work to put together a symphony concert. You do it one night and put it away, and you know, you just spend $25,000, $30,000 on putting together this program, and you did it once, and well, there we are. You know, that was nice. Hope we can play that piece again in 30 years.
Yeah, I was going to say in a couple decades.
I mean, the Greater Milford Community Chorus, you know, by the end of that whole Holiday Pops run of rehearsals and 2 performances, they were phenomenal. And
I absolutely loved them.
They were like a team. I mean, they were excited. I mean, hey, they'll be our Holiday Pops chorus for a long time to come. And they grew. I think part of it is like the fact that now they get to sing with the symphony on this thing. That can attract new people, new voices to come and want to be part of that. My wife joined.
I was going to say, you know, the funniest thing is I was looking for her. And I said, it's not like her to miss a major symphony.
Yeah, she decided to stay home.
Well, it's just, it's strange because, you know.
She's not back there greeting people.
As silly as it sounds, you get used to Frank and Virginia are there, you know, the Seavers are there. You can go through.
Oh, yeah, the whole.
Everybody is kind of in their place.
People in their usual seats.
And it's like, somebody's missing. And then it's like, Susan, where is she? Didn't dawn on me.
Well, that was actually kind of funny, too, because, you know, I've never actually conducted a symphony concert where I'm, you know, conducting the orchestra and the chorus and looking up, and my wife is actually.
And she has to follow your lead?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the first time she did what I said. I mean, it was, and I'll give her credit. Every time I looked up to give a cue, she was watching. Yeah, she had her eyes on the conductor.
I think the biggest concern was we always thought of New World Chorale as this professional, high level, and then you say, okay, the local Milford. What's it going to be like? And then when you're done, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
New who?
Well, and the New World Chorale will be joining us in March they're coming back to do a symphony concert with us in March.
Oh, cool.
We're doing the big, I mean, it's a humongous work, Ralph Vaughan Williams' Sea Symphony. You know, now that's something that takes kind of a professional, you know, college-trained, you know, people that majored in music type of voices to do that kind of piece. But, you know, so you'll see them then, but, you know.
So you're rolling into Fire and Ice. 4 minutes of intense music. I mean, am I describing it incorrectly?
Yeah, all right. Well, let's back up and go, you know, all these programs have some kind of starting point where, you know, there was a certain piece I want to do. And so you say, okay, so let's put that there. And it's like...
that's the cornerstone.
There's the cornerstone of that program for that night. Now, okay, what do you do with it? What's going to be around it? It's like
so you wake up and say, I'm going to wear out my musicians in 4 minutes?
Yeah, well, I mean, so...
They annoyed me, I'm going to wear them out.
The cornerstone piece, and almost none of the composers' names on this program are going to be familiar to the average layman. But it's like great music. And if we've done nothing over 17 years, hopefully we've won the trust of people that they always hear a great concert, even if they didn't know this piece they were about to experience, that they walk out saying that was amazing. So, So there's this piece by the composer Jean Sibelius, who's from Finland. Now, Sibelius, as a composer, well, he wrote the piece called Finlandia, which is very kind of,
It's more known.
right? And it's got that kind of chorale hymn, da 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 dee da. That it's become kind of like a hymn for peace and brotherhood that's sung in church and other places. But Sibelius kind of created a sort of national musical vocabulary in his writing, that came, was kind of Scandinavian. So when you listen to his music, you kind of can envision, even if you didn't know he was from Finland, it's like this kind of massive, big sound piece of music where you could close your eyes and imagine, giant glaciers and monumental ice formations.
You're going up the fjord and
the fjords and
right, immediately you almost feel like there I am traveling up the fjord.
Yeah, kind of, and it's romantic and lush and gorgeous melodies and things like that, but it's got this massive starkness to it. Like you're kind of thinking what it must be like to kind of live in a place like that. That it's a daily kind of survival struggle. You have to, wear all these parkas and mukluks and trudging. 50 degrees outside.
It's gorgeous,
is summer.
but I got to fight for the right to survive.
I'm going to survive, and yet people have lived there for millennium, right? And they don't leave. They love it. But it creates this hardiness and this element of living in the face of the elements, right? So that's kind of like, and by the way, that piece I played in college, and I loved it, and that was 1978. So finally, under 30 years, I'm getting around to doing it again. Or is it 40 years? Yeah, it might be 40. Yeah. So that was my time frame. I got to play this again before 40 years go by. So. But then, so you have that piece, and, I like themes, threads that run through a program that you can kind of tie something together. And I was, when I was struggling to kind of think of something that could fit neatly with this, that wouldn't be out of character, then I came up with the fire and ice idea. So Sibelius is ice, and it's almost like you think of the color blue. And then I thought, well, let's find music that kind of is the opposite, And, well, Igor Stravinsky, we've done a number of his works over the last couple of years. Well, he wrote this short little piece called Fireworks. It's actually, like his opus 4, meaning probably about the fourth thing that he ever wrote and completed and published. It's called Fireworks. I remember studying it as a student, the clarinet parts to it. It's got a lot of notes, and it's exuberant and flashy and explosive, and it's just what it says, as billed. It's fireworks music. Then there's a piece by the Spanish composer Manuel de Falla. Now here's a piece that I can remember my little sister working on piano as a student called Ritual Fire Dance. And that's like this driving, kind of swirling, building and building kind of dance that, gets more and more exciting. And that comes from a ballet called El Amor Brujol. I'm not good at Spanish, so I won't try and really roll my tongue on that, but it means love the magician. And so it's this whole ballet, and the centerpiece of the ballet musically is called the Ritual Fire Dance. So. And then we're featuring our harpist, Mason Morton.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, that guy is something else. I love Mason. He's just the finest harpist we've ever had in the orchestra. And on top of that, he's a really nice guy. Harpists can be prima donnas to work with or deal with sometimes. I mean, Mason is easygoing, wonderful to have in the orchestra. Everybody loves him, you know, he's just so friendly. He's just part of the gang.
But doesn't he have to be to get everybody to help him move the harp?
You know, he's actually quite good. And that's another thing, you know, it's like you typically pay the harpist extra money. We call it cartage because they've got this big thing.
That and the percussion guy that you always keep in the back.
Guys, right. But, you know, in my previous experiences with harpists, I'm paying them extra, but then the harpist arrives, comes up, and says, I'm here. Can somebody go get my harp for me? It's out in the car. And it's like, well, what am I paying you for? You know, I mean, you're the one that's got the harp. I mean, if you didn't want to lug it, you should have played flute. But so, you know, I usually end up having to help lug a harp in. I mean, give you a case in point, just this Saturday, you know, we're getting convened on stage at the Stadium Theater, getting ready to go to work with Ronan Tynan and see just what we're going to do with him on all these 20 different pieces he brought along that we're going to play. You know, and I was getting a little worried because Mason hadn't showed up yet. I mean, it was early yet. We still had 10 minutes to go, but in he comes about 5 minutes before the rehearsal, pulling his harp along on a little cart caddy. You know, gets to the stage door. The stagehands rush over. It's like, oh, do you need help? He's like, oh, no, I got it. He just picks the whole harp up off the thing and carries it up the stairs all by himself, sits down, tunes, and he's like ready to go. So he's doing this piece by Maurice Ravel, a French composer. And it's, again, very beautiful, lush, romantic impressionism. So that's how we put the whole program together. It all started with that icy symphony from Finland and evolved into another thing I wanted to do on the program was the theme music from Game of Thrones. Because,
that would be nice.
Yeah, because the original working title of that was called Land's Tales of Fire and Ice or something like that. That was the original title.
Well, people would recognize it. I don't know if they'd know the title.
The only problem is you can't get the music. It's sort of like, think under contract and there's some kind of show or something going around.
Oh,
and the only music that I was able to buy is like a elementary school orchestra rendition of it, and I just thought, well, we really just can't, that would be too silly. I mean, it's a very simple piece, but this is way too simple, so. But,
well, I mean, you are in a point where if you can't put up a Claflin Hill class piece,
yeah,
you're not going to do it.
You should, like, you know, just
wait next year.
Wait until you can get around to doing that again.
Yeah.
So, meanwhile, so
So now the stadium, how did you get hooked up there?
Well, that's a nice story. Do we have time?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Well, the lady who's the executive director at the Stadium Theater, his name is Kathy LeVay, who actually used to work here in Milford. She was at Milford Daily News for a while working there, and then she was at Milford Federal Savings and Loan. So she's been familiar with Claflin Hill because, you know, of the workplace that she was in, and, you know, like Milford Federal obviously is a major sponsor of the symphony from day one. And so then she took this job, I don't know how long ago, maybe 7, 8, 10 years ago at the Stadium Theater. And number one, if you've not been to it, it's a beautiful, beautiful theater. I mean, it's been refurbished. It's like a 1915, 1920 period vaudeville era theater.
Isn't it like twice as big as what we're used to in Milford?
Well, I think it holds about 1,200 people.
And we hold what, 600?
700.
700. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, it's a you know, different kind of, it's a theater as opposed to what we have is, you know, the Milford Town Hall. You could consider to be a symphony hall style hall, you know? I mean, it wasn't probably intended that way when it was built in the 1800s, but basically that's what it is. Our town hall is just like Symphony Hall in Boston, you know, same shape. You know, the Stadium Theater is an actual theater, you know, with stadium seating, and it has a pit, you know? I mean, you could put an orchestra under the stage in a pit, and it's got all the accoutrements of an old-style theater. It even has a Wurlitzer organ, which is, you know, a huge pipe organ, which if we ever did something with a massive organ part in a symphony, we could do that there. At any rate, Kathy became their executive director, and she's quite a fireball, I would say. You know, I mean, she's got all sorts of ideas and thoughts and things going on. They bought the building next door to the theater, and they're renovating that. They're going to turn it into, you know, workshop space for the theater productions that go on there. She wants to open a community music school there in the
Stadium
future.
Theater's private.
Yeah, it's a private nonprofit, just like Claflin Hill. So she had talked to me a number of years ago, let's say 5 years ago, about bringing the symphony there to do a holiday pops concert. Because, you know, she said she's just always loved our symphony and wants to bring it to the Stadium Theater. But at the time, she didn't have budget to guarantee the payroll. And her idea at the time, well, she had two ideas. Number one was, you know, she'd sell tickets and we'll see how we do. And I said, well, that really doesn't
what do we get,
work for me.
15%?
I mean, you know, because, you know, if you don't sell
1,000 tickets.
enough to pay the orchestra, I still need to pay them. So
Right.
I'm sorry, I can't like do that kind of risk. Number two, she also wanted, the date she wanted to give me was like the Friday right after Thanksgiving. And I said that would be suicidal because I don't think anybody would come to a symphony concert the day after. They're going to go to the mall. At any rate, so, I mean, we had this nice chat and said, well, you know, you let me know someday down the road. Well, she continued with her building program there and bringing things to the stadium and doing better and better. And as it happened, a year ago, on Christmas Eve morning, she called me. Christmas Eve morning. Now, as a good Milfordian, I did what people in Milford usually do on Christmas Eve. I was down at Oliva's at 8 in the morning. I don't actually get dinner there because we make our own Christmas Eve dinner, but I always like to get bread. So I ordered 3 or 4 loaves of Oliva's bread, and I did, you know, the usual stand in line outside on the sidewalk, you know.
Carla,
the whole
let me
thing,
in.
waiting for my turn to go in and get my bread. I did that. It's about 8:30 in the morning, and I'm going back to my office, and I'm going to, like, just clean out emails and a few things, and then I'm not coming back here for days because it's the holidays, right? I'm done. We did our holiday pops. We're got a few days off. So I'm sitting at my desk and the office phone rings, and I look at the caller ID, and it says Stadium Theater. I was like, really? You've got to be kidding me. I mean, so I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, my cell phone starts ringing. It's the same number, and I thought, well, she's persistent. So I answered the phone. I said, hello? And she said, Paul, it's Kathy at the stadium. It's like, yeah. And she said, well, Merry Christmas. I said, yeah, it's Christmas.
It's Christmas.
It's like Christmas. And she said, well, I just wanted to talk to you about next year doing holiday pops.
Well, at least
here.
it's next year. We can breathe easy.
I said, okay. She said, you know, we've sold out a holiday pops concert with she had a different orchestra there for the last couple of years, and their audience had built, and they'd sold it out 2 years in a row. And she said, but I don't like the program they do. I want a real holiday pops concert, like what you do, the traditional, you know. They do like a winter concert. It's like the politically correct version of holiday pops. So I said, well, we do the real deal, and we just sold ours out, so I would love to talk to you about it and talk about a date. And she said, yeah, and I can guarantee you whatever you need to be paid for it.
Well, that's even
Well,
better.
That's even better. I said, let's enjoy the holidays. Merry Christmas to you. Happy New Year. And let's talk first week of January. I'll come down. We'll look at the calendar and we'll make a deal, which is what I did. So that's how.
But Holiday Pop's got to be one of the more expensive concerts when you figure the chorus,
Yeah, I mean, it's not one of the more expensive because usually it takes us 2 rehearsals as opposed to 3 to put it together.
Okay.
And the orchestra is usually a little smaller. I mean, you know, the next couple of concerts, we're going to have massive orchestras. You know, you have like extra wind players because these pieces have all sorts of extra parts in them. You need big string sections. I mean, holiday pops, you can usually, you have the chorus, which is, 40 voices, and that makes a big sound. And, your string section can be a little smaller, by a few people here and there.
But you still got 75 people, or?
Yeah, I think actually the orchestra size for holiday pops was around 50, 55.
So you got 90 people.
Yeah, and the chorus.
All together, that's a lot of people.
Well, it's a lot of bodies on stage, yeah. So, we ended up doing the holiday
But if you
pops.
can do 1,200 tickets, that's pretty cool.
Well, I think it would be for them, yeah. I mean, I hope she made a lot of money on it. I mean, we got paid what we asked, and we were happy, and I hope she did well. So, and then, right after we signed a contract to do the holiday pops there, in the spring she called me and said, we have Ronan Tynan coming to the Stadium Theater next January. And I was looking at a video of him doing a concert with just his pianist. And I'm thinking, wouldn't it be so much more exciting to have an orchestra backing him up? And I said, well, he does these performances all over the world. He must have an orchestra package. So put me in touch with his people, and I can find out, what the size orchestra and instrumentation he requires. He's probably got all the music they could send to us to have ready to go, and I'll let you know what the budget would be to hire an orchestra for that. So we did do that, and it was actually quite a gig.
I was going to say, but that's got to make you feel good that you're getting called to play with somebody like him.
Yeah. And actually what I didn't realize, he lives in Scituate.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I always assumed he's like down in New York because he used to sing at Yankee Stadium all the time doing God Bless America at the seventh inning stretch and so on. And you saw his name down in New York a lot. But, I mean, and I'll tell you, it was interesting. I was actually more nervous about that thing that we did this past weekend, going to it, because, it's an unknown quantity. I don't know what he's going to be like to work with. He sent me 2 boxes full of music, most of which I've never played or heard. They did not send me any recordings of him singing this stuff, so I could study ahead of time. So I'm walking in and just kind of hoping this goes well, because we have 2 hours to put this whole thing together. Wait. And if things fall apart...
That's it? Rehearsal is 2 hours?
That's it. Not to mention the orchestra had to do a few of our pieces by ourselves as part of the program. So I'm thinking, if we get bogged down in the first number and we spend 20 minutes on it, times 20, we're going to be out of time, and this is going to be a nightmare. Instead, and him and his guy walk in. They don't know anything about us. So, and, we run the overture piece that they want us to do the first time. It was a little ragged. We're reading it down for the first shot. He said, all right, I'm going to do this and do that, and we did it one more shot. He said, we'll return to it at the end of rehearsal. And then as we went through each piece, one after the other, I mean, he started to get real comfortable with us. He was like, yeah, you got it. All right, that's the tempo. All right, yeah, okay. Next one, let's do that. Then we did, as the orchestra, he invited us to do 2 pieces just featuring the orchestra, one of which was, I picked the Lord of the Dance. We did that last year on the Irish-Italian concert. Michael Flatley, that Irish dance show that was on Broadway. So we did that, and then on the second half we did a medley from Phantom of the Opera. Now, I mean, you could see him and his pianist, especially the show, when we opened with the overture, that he had kind of went like this on the first reading. We ripped it in the concert. And you could see them just go like, ooh, wow, it's like, wow, what an orchestra. So it felt good, And the audience, they love the orchestra, they love Ronan. I mean, he's a great guy. I mean, he's got kind of a Claflin Hill kind of approach. Maybe this is the way they do that kind of, it's almost like folk concert. He's telling stories and then singing music that came out of the story, So, a lot of times, in between pieces, he'd sit on a stool and tell them a anecdote about something in his life and then introduce this next piece. And, everybody in the orchestra, we're sitting there listening to him tell his stories. And I got a lot of comments from the orchestra after the weekend just saying, what a great experience it was to be on stage with him, to perform with him. I'm hoping if he's doing a program or somewhere in New England,
he'll
he
reach
might
out.
request us to be his orchestra again sometime. I don't know. Could be. But,
Well, I mean, it's nice he's local, so you never know what he's going to be playing.
yeah. You never know. Maybe you might see him at Claflin Hill in some year.
And you're drawing 1,000 people at the Stadium Theater.
Yeah.
That's amazing, because, I mean, we still don't draw 700 for every concert.
Not every concert. I mean, we sold
Getting
out
better.
holiday. Yeah, we are. Hey, these things don't happen overnight. I mean, and I never thought it would, and I know it won't. I mean, what we have is something that builds word of mouth. It's not like we're selling, discount furniture or Big Macs or something, and suddenly everybody runs to it. It's like, here's
you're
one
being
more neat little anecdote. I'm sitting in my office this morning, and our office suite is in the Grant Building downtown, which is owned by Ronnie Pagnini.
Thank you to
Jr.,
Mr. Pagnini.
Great guy. Who supports us by giving us practically free rent on a beautiful corporate office space. He's replacing all of the lighting in the building. I mean, I think it's partly through some mass save grant or something, energy efficient. We're getting LED lighting, finally. Because none of those fluorescent light fixtures in my office actually work. I mean, I sit there with little lamps
Trying to
shining
get
on me.
light.
It probably looks like I'm having mood lighting. It's just, no, the lights don't work, So they're getting ready to come upstairs and do the lighting upstairs. They've been working in the first floor this week. And so this guy is up there bringing up all the big boxes of the light fixtures, getting them ready to start replacing our lights. And so he came in. I'm sitting at the computer working on something, and he said, "Hey, excuse me, it's funny." And I was like, "What? What's he going to tell me?" He said, "I only ever listen to rock and roll music, but just lately, all of a sudden I started listening to, I don't know what station, 99.5 or something. It's a classical station." He said, "Now I only listen to that. I don't listen to anything else anymore." And I said, so I got talking to him about that, and I said, "Well, that's kind of neat." I said, "I kind of went the other way. I started at 12 listening to classical, and then, when I'm 28 years old, I bought a Mustang GT and suddenly felt like I needed to have rock tunes, playing on my car stereo. And I listened to that a couple of years and then kind of put that aside, went back to my classical stuff. But I said, there's a lot of elements of pop music that you can find in classical music. It's just, it takes you a little later in life to start delving into it. It's like when you're younger, you drink cheap beer or cheap wine. As you're older, you start acquiring a taste for finer things, and you have the time to kind of try and understand it.
But I think a lot of people like me who never really got exposed to classical music. If you had told me 10 years ago that I'd be sitting in my office with Dvorak on, I would have looked at you and said, "Excuse me?"
Yeah.
But through Claflin Hill, Shostakovich, I mean, I can just name so many of them that, being uneducated in music.
And I think, in a way, it's a greater thing for a musician to kind of point to as a life accomplishment that you played for people that never heard it before. It's nothing to be a musician in the Boston Symphony and play for people that always
Paul, we'll end
did
on,
that.
I think you've taken it halfway there. You've played for people who never heard of it, who now want to hear more. Mm-hmm. To me, that's what I appreciate mostly from Claflin Hill, is that I've been exposed to music that I never knew, that now I enjoy listening
Well,
to.
I'm glad.
So, as always, take advantage of Claflin Hill. Come on out to the concerts. To our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless, and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just